Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday on this fifth day of May. I know it's been an interesting spring so far, and things change on a daily and weekly basis, and that's why uh, we at NICH decided that we wanted to help everyone in the consumer horticulture space find the resources that they are desperately looking for, whether you're a retailer, a grower, a supplier. We're all being affected, and we really wanted to get together today and not necessarily tell you what you should be doing, but rather, offer some helpful tools and give you a place to find the resources you need. So thanks for joining us. So a little bit about NICH. You might have heard of us before, and we have been out there for a while, but NICH is the National Initiative for Consumer Horticulture. And our mission is really to grow this world and sector of consumer horticulture and get more consumers actively participating in gardening, growing plants, and just in general horticultural activities. And so, we're made up of leaders from across the nonprofit, the academic, and the commercial sector of the industry. And our goal is to, by communicating through all of these different channels and functions, is to increase consumer engagement with what we do. And so that's a little bit of background about us. My name is Mason Day. I'm the co-vice chair of NICH, and I'm also the head of support, community support and engagement for J.R. Peters Incorporated out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I just want to, before we get started, give a special a thank you to our webinar committee for making this all possible, which is Missy Gable, Lauren Garcia Chance, and Heather Kirk Ballard, and of course myself. And so thank you to everybody that helped make this possible, and let's get started. So like I said before, this spring is a really an interesting one, and depending on where you live, things have been, terrible. Things have been, for some areas of the country, early reports said that, weekends were a 10. If you looked at Chris Beatty's reports of retail weekends early in, months of April, and, it depends on where you're at. And we don't want to necessarily sit here and say, hey, this is what you need to do, but we want to help you when you have questions and when you want to find the answers that are going to help you do business in the spring. We wanted to bring together a slew of resources and really say, hey, here's a jumping off point for you. And, to really, there's a lot of news going out there, and I feel like there is a lot of noise, and to find really what's going to help your business, we hope that this helps cut through some of that noise. And of course, our main goal as an organization is to cultivate consumer interest, and that's what we want to help you do this spring, regardless of what's happening out there. So we've taken the time to break this presentation up into 3 sections. From a retailer standpoint, and then we'll cover grower standpoints and supplier standpoints, but to really emphasize, at each level of the chain, needs are different, and we're going to have to work hard together to make this spring successful, but that's what we're here for. So as far as retailers go, the main question that we're seeing across the industry is, what are the restrictions and can I open? And this is really being handed down at a state and local level. Even some states we're seeing now have opened up certain restrictions, but it's more of a citywide or a community-wide saying, hey, this is what we prefer. And for us to come out and say, hey, here's the state by state information, that sort of resource is already out there. And here are a couple of different, sources for that type of information. Actually, the Nursery and Landscape Association of North America has a great map in place that shows state by state regulation status. If you hover over your state, you can see what the regulation is, how long was it in place. SAF, the Society of American Florists, also does a thorough breakdown on a state-by-state basis on almost like news coverage to say, hey, this is the reopening status, here are the regulations in place. And then, of course, we threw in the CDC link here because when it comes to specific guidelines and guidance for the safety of you and your employees, as well as your customers, the CDC is, obviously working on, this is what we recommend from a, whether that's a regulation per se, or more of a guidance effort. taking a look at what they recommend is always a good idea for, when you're employing your own safety policies in retail. And so if you're really curious about, hey, can we be open? What kind of open can we be? Whether that's online only, delivery, or if you can have people in store and you just need to keep social distancing measures, we recommend taking a look at the top 2 websites here and really understanding what's happening at a state by state and local level. So retailers that do allow, or in states that do allow retailers to have folks in store, Illinois is currently one of those. This weekend went out and had a chance to drive by some of the garden centers here in St. Charles, Illinois, and saw that thankfully, people were visiting those stores, and from the looks of things, they were taking proper safety measures. Regardless of what the status is, and I think regardless of what the season is, the number one concern of all of our businesses is the safety of our customers and our employees. And that's just a good business practice to have in general. In this spring, obviously it's all about limiting that person-to-person exposure. And as I'm sure you've seen in other retail outlets, your grocery stores with the one-way signs, the markings on the floor denoting, hey, in line, this is 6 foot away from the next person. So we can do the same things in our stores, and that's just an easy copy and paste from another business to say, hey, this is what we would like to do. It's as simple as putting up a sign that says, hey, this aisle goes this way. And one of the ways that I think we can get a little bit creative this spring, in the fact that a lot of garden centers, if we're honest, are more of a free form space, and we just allow people to kind of wander and find the things that they need. But we have the ability to play with different ideas, and we have large plants in a lot of our areas that we can use as barriers. So whether it's your large house plants, you're talking about trees and shrubs, to use them as a path, to create a path and say, hey, you can take people through your entire garden center, maybe kind of like the IKEA model, right, where you have to go through the whole store to get to checkout. Or if it's just like, hey, you're building a garden, so you're going to want to start with this level of height, then move on to the next one, and then the next one. But we can really create that path of a customer, not only to maybe help our business and help people understand what they should be getting, because I think that's going to be a concern this spring as well. Is you'll have a lot of people say, I need plants, but maybe not necessarily know what have a fully fledged idea of what they should be doing. But to also help people know where to go, how to keep the space. And that's not just us. Thankfully, we don't have to be the trendsetters of the social distancing. This is everybody. And I put a link in here to the National Retail Federation. They have their blueprint for safe shopping and ideas for creating a retail space that is safe for employees and safe for customers. So that's worth checking out. And then if you're interested in what does the protocol have to look like? Purdue has actually worked with a bunch of green industry businesses to create this protocol that it's not written in stone. Feel free to take a look at it. If it works for you, that's something, maybe could be a great starting point to create your own. And that's what this is all about, is figuring out what works for you and what's going to work for your business and implementing from there. So in some areas, some states and some localities, maybe having customers isn't an option due to regulations, or maybe it's something where you don't feel comfortable having, hundreds of people in your store on a daily basis for your employees, and that's okay too, and that's up to you. And so maybe online and curbside are really the only ways that you can go. And for some of you on the call, I'm sure the ones that were thought ahead, online is already something that you're doing and excelling at, and you can kind of take some notes on this and maybe get some more ideas for what you're doing or to refine what you're doing. But for, I would say, probably the most garden centers out there, this spring was really about building it or just getting through. And so when it comes to online and curbside, maybe curbside's a little easier if you're already taking phone issues, or phone calls. but you really have to take a look at what you're doing on a website and figure out how do you allow for people to interact with you on a daily basis via their phone or computer. And when I say phone, I mean via the internet, not necessarily picking up and giving you a call. So really, you're kind of put in two bubbles. You either have to build or make do. And I will say that while building something is definitely going to be the more costly investment this spring, it's going to set you up for the future. Not that, we ever hope that something like this happens again, or that we even foresee it happening again. But, the modern consumer is an online shopper, and the easier you make it for people to buy what you have, the more they're going to buy in the future. And I think that, this is a nice, kick in the butt to some of us that, we're hesitant to change on technology. And, we've decided to put together a couple of different options here, and we don't endorse any of these options. But at the same time, want to put everything out there so that you can make your own decisions. One of the links I put here is to a company called EasyWid. So they are an e-commerce plugin and website tool that can help you get set up on an e-commerce version for your store. And actually, this blog is not necessarily just about their product, but it can help you just rationalize it in general and figure out, okay, if I don't really have a website that I can edit or develop, or if I just don't have a website at all, they have a couple options there. If you have a website, here's what you can do to throw on an add-on, all the way up from nothing to, 100%. There are options for setting up curbside and online local delivery with EasyWid, and they walk you through a blog on how to, and obviously they are a provider of services, but you can go through all the way on their how to and pick your own provider. So, and some other avenues out there, I'm sure your POS company, if you already have a POS system in place, can help you figure out, what do they recommend. There are a couple more of, I'll call them startup type businesses out there, even though some of them have been around for several years. Sell My Plants. They have been putting out some things about just basically you sign up for their program, they incorporate onto your website, and then you click what you have in inventory based on they're working with other companies that are your suppliers. NetPS, which some of you already have their services on your website. Perfect Plant, Shopify. Shopify is an example of somebody that's not in our industry, but that we can take something that other industries are using, adapt it to our needs, and then bring it back and suited for us. And, obviously your neighborhood web dev. They're small businesses too, and they are being hit in the same way that a lot of our businesses are. They were busy for maybe the first couple weeks, putting out COVID announcements and reconfiguring websites. But if there's an option to go with your local neighborhood web developer and it makes you feel good, that could be something as well. I will say, I put the triangle, as we like to call it, in development, is that you're going to have things that are good, fast, and cheap are the three things, and you can only pick two. You can have something that's good and fast or good and cheap, but you can't really get good, fast, and cheap. It doesn't exist. So that's where this build it model is really going to be something that it is going to require an investment, but if you've been saving for a website, this might just be the time to do it. Now, for the other half of folks out there that really don't have the budget to go ahead and build an online portal for making purchases or taking orders to do delivery and curbside, it's okay. It might not be the best idea to just make do and hope for the best, and sometimes it's all we can do. And there are ways to get around not having that online purchasing available. So, and I think it still is online, but it's about taking advantage of social media and taking advantage of your customer lists, and things like email, whether or not you have a rewards program, and just putting things together. And again, I threw these images up here. There's some of the things that I've been working on at J.R. Peters, but it's more of an option. It doesn't have to even look pretty. It's about making things fast and getting them out to your customers. So, some ideas like a shopping list, right? Can you know what your top selling plants are? And can you get them out to your, constituents, your consumers that are coming in, and say, hey, instead of coming into the store and perusing around, we'd still like to take care of you, but we want you to submit an order. And maybe it's something that, like the graphic here is that, fulfilling curbside isn't easy. And with garden centers, growing up in the industry, I know we carry a ton of products, from plants to grills to some of us have purses and kites and all kinds of crazy items out there, not to mention soils and fertilizers. But, fulfilling an order that has something from every one of those departments can be a nightmare. And while it's not beneficial to the consumer, putting some limits out there and saying, hey, listen, we're going to do X, Y, and Z on Mondays and Wednesdays. And this is, if you need soil, it's a Thursday deal, but we can load you up in bulk, or just have one day a month. Maybe you're selling plants every day and you're like, hey, fertilizers are, here and here. And this is when we can offer you, a phone consultation or do this. But it's really about, being transparent with your customer and doing so on social media, on your website where you can. If you have a blog that you can get out there, if you can get, if you're already, locked in for radio promotion and, basically getting the word out there to your customers, that's the type of thing, that you don't necessarily have to be able to take the order online or take the payment, but making sure that your customers are aware that you're open for business, you're working on making it easy for them, and, just putting things in place that's, to communicate with them. And again, it's about, this spring is about getting through, and we're getting through this together. And if you can't do it all, it's easier to bend, and don't go to that breaking point. Don't try to do everything at once, and realize that you can't, and then just, say, this spring is a disaster. There are ways and resources out there that can help you out and help you do small amounts of business, and build off of that. And all of that is better than closing. And I included a link to some of these resources that you can see here. Feel free to use those for inspiration. You can download them, edit them, make them your own. But again, social media is the key to making do, and we can do this. So one of the key things, and we talked about this a little bit, social media being such a significant player for our industry this spring, marketing isn't stopping, and nor should it. And when I say marketing, a lot of people will think ad spend, but I'm not even necessarily talking about that. This is about your marketing efforts. This is a situation in a spring where we are going to have to talk to our consumers more than ever before. This is constant communication. People need to know, are you open? What are your hours? Now that hours aren't necessarily set in stone, what are the procedures? When I come in, do I need to have my list ready to go? Is it something that I need to, I'm not going to be able to, spend 2-3 hours in a garden center making decisions, but rather that I'm going to be in a line and better know what I want. So how can I make those decisions before I go in? And, there are a lot of different marketing resources out there. You don't necessarily have to, fire up the, Photoshop yourself or do, create these videos. Anything you can do is a bonus, but there are a lot of resources out there. The American Floral Endowment has some great resources at this link that are, videos about why flowers are important, the benefits they bring to people, the joy of flowers. And they've actually said on this website, take these videos and share them yourselves. And then, obviously, doing so on your social platforms is key, because that's where people are getting their information. It's how they're staying in touch with everyone else in their lives currently. And that's where they're going to find you as well. Garden Media Group, Katie has been putting out a fantastic series on their channels, and as well as some of the Garden Communicator Facebook groups, where she's been doing videos with different influencers in the industry. And, even if it's not something that necessarily pertains directly to your business, it's content that's worth sharing and will give you and your customers some inspiration in these times of confusion. And they're definitely worth looking at. And her guests are top notch. And of course, Dr. Bridget Behe, from Michigan State University, who has long been a wealth of marketing information for our industry and helping garden retailers figure out, how to really go after consumers. She did an article with Green Profit this spring that actually highlighted a bunch of tips and tricks to help retailers, and has stated that all of her consumer research is available to take a look at. Use what works for you, and I recommend checking all of these things out, especially since this spring is all about communicating with our customers and really emphasizing, this is our story, telling your story, and getting consumers to know that, you're a local business and important to the community, and that you're still in business and that they can buy plants from you this spring. So with all of those kind of suggestions and places to look, I will say that it is a time to be careful, obviously for our own personal safety, but also for the safety of our businesses. With crisis, there often comes cons, I guess, the scams that are out there. And, this is certainly, it doesn't make things any easier because, we're constantly looking for things that can help us out, and things that look like they might be able to help us out can sometimes turn into disasters. So while it's important to go forward, we must constantly take a look at things and, look back and say, hey, does this make sense? Is this the real deal? Asking your peers, hey, has anybody ever used this before? And things to be careful of: scams, obviously. Crisis always drums up some sort of scam. And even myself, over the last week, I've gotten probably 50 web development cold emails. And not to say that they're not good web developing services, but at the same time, it's companies that I've never heard of, and probably, didn't hear of my business before anything happened, and they're just, spamming my, email address. Email list scams where they're saying, hey, buy a list of consumer email addresses in your area. More often than not, those are not going to work out for your business. And then anything appearing to offer you monetary relief for an exchange of account numbers. Obviously, hopefully, you're able to get some relief for your business, but that is going to come from a reputable source. One thing I will say is that look at all of the email addresses, not necessarily the names in your emails when things are coming through, because people can put any name on there, whether they're putting IRS or Small Business Bureau. Look at the email address, and if it says something like radiators.BA, you can be a little skeptical of those. Some other things to be careful of: overpaying. Just because you need to have something done in a hurry doesn't mean you have to cave into price gouging. You have a lot of options out there. Businesses want to help you do business just because they're looking to continue doing business as well. And this could be a great opportunity for you to start a great relationship with other businesses in your area, to come together, and don't feel like you need to pay 10 times more than what you would outside of this situation. And sales, a friend of mine and a longtime garden center consultant in the industry, Sid Raish, even before this, he was always wary of unnecessary sales. And this is garden interest is maybe at a recent high for us, and people are really interested in getting out in their yards because, well, they have to. They don't have anything else to do. And so this is not a time for us to be thinking like fire sale and getting things out of our greenhouse. And that's where, Sid's been talking about that for a while. And there are long-term effects that has on your business and how consumers view your business. So that shouldn't be the first thing we reach for. And for more, information on that, and to connect with your peers, if you're an independent garden center, I recommend checking out this Facebook group that I believe Sid is a moderator for, but it's for retail independent garden centers, vendors, and media, where people can talk about ideas, come together with solutions, and really, things like, should I do this sale? Like that's a good question for the group, and you can get answers there. So I wanted to also throw out some additional resources for retailers. Obviously, we don't have hours and hours of time, but these are all great resources. Green Profit has a whole COVID-19 list of articles. American Hort has a couple great pages for retailers. Obviously, if you're a landscape professional, NALP is a great resource. Garden Center Magazine did a webinar with some great retail minds talking about ways to do business this spring. The American Public Gardens Association has an entire resource page. Maybe if you're in that in-between gardens and retail space, that's a great spot to check out. And then, things like the Georgia Urban Ag Council resources page, your state-by-state localities are going to have good resources and information on how to proceed with business on your own local level. So now I'd like to open up if anybody has any questions for us on the retail side of things. All right, jumping right into the grower topics for spring 2020 and resources to find information that you need. So for a lot of growers out there, this spring has been interesting because really COVID-19 has become a force in the last month and a half, but we've been growing things for maybe the last 3 months at least for some annual growers. And our greenhouses are loaded down and we have all this product and nowhere to ship it to. Hopefully that's not the case, but for some areas of the country it is. And they're waiting for things to change and open up. Folks in Michigan got to go ahead on May 1st, but until then growers were kind of like, hey, we have all this product, how do we get it out to our retailers? So when that happens, and even if that, God forbid it happen again or in the future, holding becomes a necessity to take that product that you've been growing all spring and either slow it down or just keep it in the same state that it is currently before you can ship it out. So a couple resources for that. Ball Seed has actually put together a great guide, and whether or not you're a customer, they have this information library of production guides that can offer advice for holding and delaying crops, as well as a plethora of other things. There's a wealth of knowledge and information there. And it's free to use. And if you're looking for holding crops, they have PDFs for crop specific holding patterns, or then of course if you're holding something, how do you get it out of the stasis state for when you need to ship it? And that's a good resource to check out. Also, Michigan State University has been putting out a bunch of these articles, and actually before this year even, Eric Runkle has put out a couple different things on how to hold your greenhouse crops, because there's always a need for this, whether shipments get delayed, bad weather. This is something that as we learn to do a better job of, it's not only going to benefit us in the short term, but in the long term as well. And then, of course, we at J.R. Peters have put together some fertilizer recommendations for holding, so that you can get your nutrients right for your plants, but necessarily don't want to force them into bloom too quickly. So as kind of tying into the last slide, as we try to hold more product in our greenhouse and keep it longer than we might have in the past, and as things kind of get bigger and more crowded, and plants come into closer contact than normal, as we try to keep people out of close contact, plant diseases and pests are a thing that pop up. And whether that's fungal problems, bacterial problems, viruses, we need to keep those under control. And also, this in the past, it would be really easy for a technical rep or a sales rep to walk through a greenhouse and say, oh, this is a thrip problem. But now we're keeping the other people out of our greenhouses to protect our staff and our customers. And so there isn't a whole lot of folks coming into our greenhouse to diagnose our diseases. Thankfully, there are experts out there that are still working around the clock to make sure that your business is being taken care of and your plants are staying healthy. And so, I think one of the best resources that I've seen in a recent time, there's actually a greenhouse tech team Facebook group, and I included the link here, that there are a lot of folks that are sharing, images like this on the right saying, hey, what's going on here and how do I fix it? And it's not only peers connecting, but also experts from various breeding companies and distribution companies that are saying, hey, if you've got that problem, here's the product or method that you need to implement to keep things looking great and to stop diseases from spreading throughout your greenhouse. And that's really the key, is that it's a great discussion of things that have worked on a peer level, but also the expert advice. Another great resource that I came across this spring is the eGrow newsletter. That's the top technical experts from universities across the country putting out these articles on problems that they're hearing about or seeing about, and maybe it's from extension agents or calls that they're getting. So, in past topics, how to control downy mildew, impatiens downy mildew in a greenhouse, and preparing, for shipping, as well as pests they're seeing or holding patterns like we talked about in the last slide. But this e-newsletter is a great, it's knowledge packed, and from, like I said, top university experts across the country, and well worth subscribing to, and looking forward to that coming into your inbox. So outside of keeping product happy and healthy while we can't ship it, there are some things that, as growers, we may see ourselves as the producers, right? Retailers depend on our products and, to sell and to have a good spring. And, oftentimes we can say, like, we're giving them good product, but, they're not selling it. But this spring is a little different. And not to say that it's not always different, but I mean, it's a chicken or the egg situation. There are two sides to every story. And so, I can understand how, a grower with a lot of product can say, oh, they have to sell faster. But this spring, it's especially not on your retailers. It's not a time to be upset with each other. It's a time to work together and to know that, if product isn't moving, it's not your retailer's fault. I assure you that they are doing things to make that happen. And, it's about thinking, how can we as growers make our retailers' lives even easier? It's things as small as, I put a point in here about better delivery, really knowing where your garden centers and retailers want you to deliver product. Can you help them with their traffic flow? Like, if they are, limiting the amount of people in a store or limiting the paths for people, is it about delivering your racks and setting them up in a configuration that helps them do this? Can you leave racks there that allow your retailers to basically use your racks as sort of a corral, to send people through, to say, hey, like, here are all of our vegetables and here's the vegetable pathway, rather than just having a section. With the product that you may have been having a hard time holding, is there a way to take that and plant it in a different way? So rather than having your mixed container program be something that is planted from plugs, is there a way to do value-added mixed containers that are from finished product that you couldn't ship fast enough? And so you're just creating combination pots. And let me tell you, one of the things that will be really easy to purchase this spring as a consumer, without necessarily knowing what you're doing, is a mixed container. And, helping get those products to your retailers that, can have some of those drive-by or drive-through sales could really help them out. So I put a section on here and I said, don't dump. And when I say don't dump, I don't mean, if your product is diseased or damaged, like, I don't mean don't dump as in don't throw it out. If you have to throw it out, like, that's a reality of business. But what I mean is, don't dump on your retailers. If you have product that isn't going to sell, it's not going to do them any good to get a shipment of shoddy product. This spring is not any different in that regard than others, that, people aren't going to buy bad plants, and sending bad plants through the product line so that consumers fail, is going to hurt us more in the long term. And that's where we have to work with our retailers to make sure that even some product might be a little overgrown, and that's manageable. But we have to make sure that it's product that it's going to sell, and that consumers can be successful with. And this is a time for managing relationships. And for a lot of growers that maybe have struggled to get products through retail this spring with certain regulations and restrictions, they thought, how could I, sell direct? How can I open up and sell online this spring plants and just ship from my own, grower facility? And I would recommend that you think twice about going around your retailers and selling products elsewhere. Obviously, it's a quick fix, but this is a season-long thing, that we're going to deal with, and we shouldn't let one season jeopardize decades of business. Maybe it is your best option, but at the end of the day, it's about really taking a good look at and talking with your retailers. If that's something that they can't open up, to say, hey, listen, we have to move product. What do you think? How can we do this together? And that's something that you really, it should be a discussion and not about hiding it from them, but, to figure that out together and to walk down that path together. Some quick points, if you're not already doing things to help your retailers out, but it could be really easy this spring, tying into POS systems so that your inventory comes through flawlessly into their inventory. Marketing support. So you are obviously seeing your plants before your retailers are. So making sure that, you're getting images to them so they can post on their, websites, social media, whether that's putting different, mixed container kind of photos together or whatnot. Another thing is just a better product listing. So if you know what's coming in the next couple weeks, to put it in a format that they can get it out to their consumers on their website and social media, so that it's almost like an order list or a pre-order list for your retailers. That could be something that's really useful. But to really, have a conversation and say, how do we make things easier this spring on you? Because ultimately, it all flows through retail. If consumers can't buy the products, or if they're not buying a product, we see a backlog at the grower level and supplier level as well. So we really have to make it easy for our retailers to do business this spring and help them out. Put in some more additional resources for growers here. Just like Green Profit, Grower Talks has a bunch of COVID-19 resources listed out. And then, basically some help for folks in the industry. I recommend checking out the Emergent Facebook group. Started out as a group for younger folks, but there are all sorts of horticultural professionals in that group answering and asking horticulture topics and, having good peer-to-peer conversation. Greenhouse growers, coronavirus live blogs, they're actively looking at the situation and, keeping, track of what's happening. And then, of course, American Hort has multiple coronavirus resources for just general business practices that could be affecting growers out there. So at this point, we'll take any questions from the grower standpoint. All right, moving on to suppliers. So suppliers are an interesting a group, aside from the normal level of interesting. No, but this spring, it's especially interesting because, a lot of suppliers, a lot of us have products that aren't necessarily, you don't have an expiration date, right? So it's not something that's perishable. And even if it is, it's much less perishable than a plant. And, so a fertilizer isn't necessarily going to outgrow its pot in the next 2 weeks. So, while we do have the responsibility to ourselves and to our employees, we have to recognize that our customers might have some larger priorities on their mind, but we can be a vital part of supporting them in all of their efforts. So from a supplier standpoint, it's about helping out our retailers, and we can do that, through a bunch of different ways. And one of those being, marketing support. If consumers normally are taking a look at soil or fertilizer in store, it might not be their first thing to think, oh, I need to go to the garden center for fertilizer. They're probably thinking, I need to go to the garden center for plants. But fertilizer, soil, tools, those are all things that are going to help them be successful, and they're things that they need. But we have to do a better job of helping them make that decision about what they need before they get into stores. And so, if it's creating a graphic that says, hey, we sell 3 different types of potting soil, and this one is great for X, Y, and Z, this one is great for ABC, and then this one is great for everything else. Giving those types of things to your retailers to say, hey, throw this out on social media, to help your consumers out, or print it out and put it in the store. Those types of things can really help your garden center customers better talk to those consumers, because garden center customers, or your garden center customers, probably know your products pretty well, but when it comes down to it, they have to worry about getting those plants out the door that are going to die if they don't, and so it's about making their life easier. And one of those things, even if it's when somebody shows up to a garden center, having something that says, hey, if you're buying plants today, don't forget your potting soil, or don't forget your fertilizer. And here, or, is there a way to give free samples out to your customers, your garden center customers, that they can pass out with every purchase? So things like that. Promoting your retailers. If you have a good consumer following and people are looking for what you're selling, now is the time to send them to your retailers and say, hey, our customers are here. Whether you have retail locators, targeted marketing efforts to promote your retailers, now is the spring to do that. People, the easiest thing for them to do is find you online and say, hey, how can I buy from you? But it takes us as, responsible constituents to our customers, our garden center customers, to say, hey, listen, you can find us at these retailers, and they're selling online, doing curbside, and they'll be open May 1st. And then, staying safe. This is probably a pretty obvious one, but the worst thing that can happen is that, as a supplier, you have to shut down because, someone got sick, or God forbid, like the, other circumstances. So making sure your business is up and running it provides a supply chain security for your garden centers, and allows them to not think about, where are they going to get their pavers? Where are they going to get their mulch? So it makes it easy on them to just continuing to keep doing business like they have been. And, so I put this slide in to say, how do suppliers adapt to change? How do we get more creative? And we talked a little bit about that with the marketing support, and going above and beyond what we normally would do, rather than just saying, hey, here's our product. And, what can we do to say, hey, here's our product. We're going to do everything we can to help sell through your retail location, and we believe in your garden center. And like I said, with the grower angle, you're going to have a lot of folks that are seeking for products and maybe not able to get them from their garden centers in a way that they would like to, or maybe they're new customers and they're just getting into gardening because they finally have time, or want to get outside more. And maybe you have an online store as a supplier. But obviously, you have a responsibility not only to your employees to stay in business and to continue selling, but you have a responsibility to your garden center customers, and who you have been in business with for the last 20, 30 years. So if you do have an online store, is there a way for you to sell more online, promote it, but at the same time give back to your garden center customers to say, hey, listen, this spring is different. We know you're struggling to and maybe they just don't have time to sell your hard goods that they had in the past because they're too busy pulling orders for plants. To say, hey, listen, we know that you're struggling this spring, and we have the ability to do some work on our end. But at the same time, we're going to give X percentage back of every sale in your zip code, or something. These are all ideas. But maybe it's something as simple as mitigating risk of inventory. A lot of us have, if we're doing orders, we have order minimums to say, hey, we're only, you have to buy a pallet or 2 pallets. But if you're shipping to a retailer, is there a way to take some of that out of that, to do drop shipping, to do smaller orders, to really help them out? Or is it a way for them to basically take, orders from their customers and submit an order to you, and have you package it up and basically, ship to their customers? And while, you say, yeah, I could do that through my online store, these are different times, and this is a different spring, but we have to remember that all of this will pass, and we will get through this together, and we want to come out on the other side stronger and not divided. So talking about stronger and not divided, as far as horticulture goes and getting it out there and telling the consumer about it, us and what we do as an industry, there are some things that are just good for everyone. And thankfully, you know, I've seen a lot of organizations in the industry working together and promoting the benefits of plants. You know, we are working on things here at NICH. You know, we've been putting together these graphics that are free to use for everyone, you know, in the industry to share out there, you know, promote yourselves, promote NICH, promote plants, promote all of it. And, you know, we really recognize that gardening is the ultimate social distancing activity. You know, getting outside, it allows families to be together, and it allows you to grow something for your family, whether that's food, whether it's, you know, to make your house nicer. You know, there are all sorts of studies out there that show the benefits that plants have in our lives, and you can check those out on our website as well. We have a lot of that posted. But, you know, so obviously, you know, like I said, you can take our graphics, you know, like this one, all you need is plant, or all you need are plants. And, you know, feel free to use those. We're working on them not only now, but to go forward into the future, is to help the consumer horticulture industry market their plants and market what they're doing and reach more consumers on a consolidated effort. So another great resource, Kids Gardening, kidsgardening.org. They've been putting out some top-notch content for years, but now is especially a great time to engage youngsters in the garden, get them off of those screens. You know, I think that this spring is a time to really show kids and all ages, you know, what benefits are out there in the yard, in the garden, and to engage them. And if you don't have the ideas, or your consumers don't have the ideas, Kids Gardening can help them out. And you know, another great website for these times and for all times, you know, is See Your Future. And we're all working to get through this, and we have to remember that you know, as we go through this, we need to still build our industry for the future, and that's what See Your Future is really all about. Is, you know, showing and inspiring the next generation of horticultural professionals, you know, to get inspired. And that's where See Your Future is working now to, you know, give activities out for kids that are looking for things to do, to inspire them to say, hey, this might be something that I'm interested in doing for the rest of my life. And also work to help, you know, educators, you know, communicate with different projects to their students while they're at a distance. And so these are all great resources, no matter at what stage you're in the industry, you know, supplier, retailer, grower. These are worth checking out and, you know, sharing with all of the folks that you have in your life. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and open up the floor to questions. And we'll go from there. So thank you, and let's hear what you got.